It was supposed to be a routine DNA test, nothing more than a formality. But for Officer James Carter, it unraveled a secret that shattered his world. For years, he believed he was the proud father of 3 beautiful children, cherishing every moment with them. But when a DNA test revealed they weren't his, the truth hit like a freight train. The real father, his own brother. Betrayal, heartbreak, and confusion flooded his mind. How could the woman he loved and the brother he trusted hide something so devastating? Every memory felt like a lie, every moment tainted. His entire family dynamic had been built on deception. As James struggled to process the truth, the weight of his emotions pushed him to the brink. What happens when the people closest to you become the ones who hurt you the most? And what will James do next? Stay tuned. James had always trusted his wife, Sarah, and his brother, Mark. They shared countless memories together, family vacations, holidays, and late-night talks. They were his pillars, his support system. So when the results came back, it felt like his whole life had been a carefully constructed illusion. Sarah had always been loving and devoted, a mother who doted on their kids. But how could she keep such a monumental secret from him? And Mark, his own flesh and blood, how could he betray him in such a cruel way? The shock of the discovery left James questioning everything. Was he just a pawn in a twisted game he hadn't known he was playing? And the most painful question, why? What had driven Sarah and Mark to make this choice, and when had it all started? The answers seemed elusive, and the more James tried to understand, the more tangled the web of lies became. James couldn't stop replaying the moment he saw the DNA results. It was as if his world had split into 2 realities, one where everything made sense, and another where nothing did. As the days passed, he began to notice subtle things he had once dismissed. Sarah's odd behavior, her evasiveness when he asked about their past, the way she and Mark had exchanged knowing glances. Was this something that had been going on for years? Or was it a recent betrayal? In his quieter moments, James found himself grappling with a storm of emotions. Anger, sadness, disbelief. He couldn't even bring himself to confront Sarah yet. He needed answers, but the thought of facing her made him sick. And Mark, what was going through his mind? How could he have done this to his own brother? Was there more to the story than James realized? But there was something else lurking beneath the surface. James couldn't ignore the feeling that there was a deeper, darker truth to uncover. Had this all been planned from the beginning, or was it a tragedy of circumstances? He started to wonder if he'd ever really known the people closest to him. As the days grew longer, the tension between James, Sarah, and Mark only deepened. Every conversation felt like a careful dance around the inevitable confrontation. But James knew the truth would come out sooner or later. He just had to be ready for it. And when it did, would he even recognize the family he thought he knew? The days felt like weeks as James wrestled with the silence that had settled between him, Sarah, and Mark. Every conversation with Sarah felt strained, like she was hiding something just beneath the surface. She seemed nervous, avoiding eye contact, and her once warm presence now felt distant. Mark, on the other hand, acted as if nothing had changed, unaware or pretending to be unaware of the looming storm. James couldn't escape the growing sense that he was being watched, like he was a stranger in his own home. The kids didn't know what was going on, and that made it harder. He loved them more than anything in the world, but the truth was suffocating him. How could he raise them knowing the reality of their origins? And how could he ever look at Sarah or Mark the same way again? The questions kept piling up, each one heavier than the last. Was he just a fool to believe in the perfect family? Was it all a lie built on secrets and deception? He found himself imagining the confrontation, playing out the argument in his head. How would Sarah react? Would Mark own up to his actions, or would he deny everything? The tension was unbearable. James couldn't hold it in much longer. He knew the moment of truth was coming. Soon he would have to face the people who had shattered his world. But what would that moment look like? Would it be an explosion of anger, or would the truth come out slowly, in the quietest, most devastating way imaginable? James couldn't tell anymore. All he knew was that nothing would ever be the same again. Just when James thought he couldn't be more conflicted, a phone call late one night threw everything into chaos. It was from an unknown number, a voice on the other end that he didn't recognize. "You need to know the truth, James. Everything you've been told is a lie," the voice said, voice shaking with urgency. "It's not just Sarah and Mark. There's more to this than you can imagine." James's heart stopped. Was this some kind of prank? A sick joke? But the voice continued, speaking in hushed tones, revealing secrets that made his blood run cold. The caller claimed that it wasn't just Mark who had been involved in the deception. There was another person, someone James had never suspected, someone close to him, who had been pulling strings behind the scenes. The revelation hit like a thunderclap. Who else could it be? Was the entire family involved in this web of lies? Was his own past, everything he thought he knew, nothing but an elaborate setup? The caller refused to say more, only warning James to trust no one, not even Sarah. As the phone call ended abruptly, James was left reeling, his mind racing. Every theory he had started to develop now seemed trivial compared to this new bombshell. Had he been living in a house of cards, one gust of wind away from it all falling apart? The weight of the unknown pressed down harder than ever. He needed answers, but now he wasn't sure where to turn. The very people he trusted had been hiding something darker than he could have ever imagined. And with each passing moment, the mystery deepened, pulling him closer to a truth he wasn't sure he could handle. The next morning, James couldn't hold back any longer. He had to confront Sarah and Mark, no matter the cost. His mind raced with the phone call's cryptic warning, but he couldn't shake the feeling that the time for hiding the truth was over. His emotions were a whirlwind, betrayal, confusion, and a deep, gnawing pain that he couldn't. Mark's expression was filled with regret. "I wanted you to know the truth, James. I thought you deserved to hear it from me, not from them." In that moment, everything clicked. The lies, the secrets, and the call, it had all been part of Mark's confession. But as the weight of the truth settled in, James realized the final twist. Even in his darkest moments, his family hadn't just betrayed him. They had been trying to protect him from something far worse. The painful truth was that they had acted out of fear and love, though it had come at a devastating cost. And in that silence, as the full story unraveled, James didn't know whether to forgive or walk away. But one thing was clear: his family would never be the same, and neither would he. James sat there in silence, taking in the full weight of the revelations. The room felt heavy, and the once familiar faces of Sarah and Mark seemed almost like strangers. But despite the betrayal, despite the confusion, he realized one thing: there was still love, and that love was tangled in a web of mistakes. The truth had come out, and it was messy, painful, and complicated. In the days that followed, James began to process everything. He realized that while trust had been broken, there was still a chance for healing. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't happen overnight, but the bond with his children was unbreakable. They were his, no matter their origins. As for Sarah and Mark, they had their own journey to make amends. The family had been fractured, but with time, understanding, and honesty, James knew they could find a way forward, together or perhaps apart. The future was uncertain, but one thing was for sure: the truth had set them all free.